Joe Gibbs Racing time and time again has chosen old guys, veteranosity, to lead its empire to the successes in the NASCAR realm. It is a proven model that has won them races and championships, arguably the dominators of the late 2010s. But what if there was a season where it wasn't the veterans that were eating the slice of success in the JGR pie, devoured instead by one of the few that survived the TRD Grim Reaper? NRF Productions proudly presents how Christopher Bell's 2022 season shook up the Joe Gibbs Racing norm. Like the NASCAR Cup Series in 2018, Joe Gibbs Racing had itself its core group of drivers that gave its organization a plethora of memories and moments. Kyle Busch, 24 karat gold, didn't just define his personality,
everything's great,
but also the hardware he took home to Joe Gibbs Racing's Huntersville, North Carolina shop. Denny Hamlin, yes, his only cup continues to be a Folgers Cup, but even then, his JGR life spans 4 generations of NASCAR experience with Gen 4, COT, Gen 6, and now the next generation car makes him a respected veteran that is cultured in a way vastly different than most of his competitors. Martin Truex Jr. The taste of disappointment throughout his career and personal life led to his pursuit of success. By the time he joined JGR, he was now an established Cup Series champion at the prime of his career. This was the Joe Gibbs Racing Big Three. The core, together as teammates, combined to win half the races in 2019, dominance we hadn't seen since Hendrick Motorsports in 2007. Advancing to the championship for 6 times combined, and Kyle Busch was able to win his second NASCAR Cup Series championship in this era. Joe Gibbs Racing with these 3 drivers dominated the NASCAR landscape, except arguably its most storied entry among its 4 horses. The car that in this era could almost be casted away as the R&D car, and believe it or not, that is car number 20. And considering that most of NASCAR's audience is people over 50, you remember a time where that wasn't the case at all. For the better part of the 2000s, this was the organization led by Tony Stewart. The vivid Tangelo orange Home Depot number 20 dominated various NASCAR Sundays in the 2000s. But since Tony Stewart's departure to pursue becoming a successful driver car owner, Joey Logano, Matt Kenseth, and Eric Jones, drivers that have amassed a great number of wins and championships, believe it or not, the driver of the JGR number 20 was the lowest ranking JGR driver in the point standings in 8 of the last 13 years, including the past 3 seasons, where Joe Gibbs Racing made up half of the final 4 participants, and still, the 20 car, how many did they contribute to? None. Christopher Bell in 2022 looked to build on a stepping stone sophomore season. Adam Stevens defecting from Kyle Busch to this 20 team gave Christopher Bell his first moment, his first memory of the NASCAR Cup Series, cherishing his first victory at the Daytona Road Course, which, if we're being honest, doesn't happen if NASCAR doesn't call a frauded rain caution. Yes, I'm beating a dead horse here. But still, overall, this was a 180 in performance, not just for C. Bell, but this entire 20 team, making it back to the postseason and advancing to the round of 12 for the first time since the days of Matt Kenseth. This 2022 season of chaos, calamity, basically every word in the dictionary to describe the word insanity, began just as that for this third-year driver from Oklahoma, even though they desperately did not want this at all. At Auto Club, Christopher Bell lost control. A routine spin for the old car, the Generation 6, but you've got to remember, this next generation car, it's special. With the new 18-inch tires without the inner liners, Christopher Bell could not limp the car back to pit road, back to the service of Adam Stevens, and as a result, lost 4 laps. Las Vegas the next week would look rather promising, even getting a tremendous praise from a former driver in the Fox booth.
You know, since the start, Christopher Bell hasn't really gone anywhere. He's still there. I bet they're continuing to make that car better and better, and I wonder how.
But as things typically go with Danica Patrick, Christopher Bell would find himself facing the grandstand, skidding out of control at 180 miles an hour.
Whoa! Just kidding.
Oh, he's gonna.
Oh!
The West Coast swing would see Christopher Bell loop it around again, flat spotting the tires and extinguishing any hope he had of getting a decent finish. So after 5 races, you would typically look towards the top of the standings to find where the JGR drivers are at, because historically, JGR is defined as a team of success, which made it rather stunning that you had to go all the way down to 30th to find Christopher Bell down in the dumps, getting outpointed by his Truck Series successor at KBM, Todd Gilliland. So realistically, there were 2 ways that Christopher Bell could dig out of this immense hole to start the season. He could do what his teammate Denny Hamlin did to erase his 26th rank in the points, go for broke, and try to get wins and playoff points. Because of course, this is a format that values that one taste of champagne over weeks of mechanical failures, poor setups, and in Bell's case, spinning out to flat spot the tires. Or this 20 team could take the calculated approach. This is only race 5 of the season. Yes, he's 8 feet deep into a hole, but that is something he can easily dig out of because he has plenty of time. And through weeks of just consistently getting stage points and top 10 finishes, Christopher Bell could find himself where a JGR driver truly belongs in the point standings. In the next 12 races, Christopher Bell used this approach to earn himself 4 top 5s and 9 top 10 finishes, averaging a finish of 10.1 in this stretch, one of the consistently better drivers at this point in the season. So you can imagine that he climbed the points ladder all the way up to 8th in points with just a few races remaining in the regular season. Still, as the NASCAR Cup Series entered New Hampshire, the theme of the season would not reward this type of consistency. This isn't 2013. This race, through 2 stages, looked like it was a vintage Martin Truex Jr. showing, and with his win, it would now mean 14 winners. Then, through a bizarre series of strategy and some untimely adjustments from James Small, Martin Truex Jr. driving the Interstate Batteries livery that looks identical to Kyle Busch's one that he always drives in New Hampshire, was stuck back in 10th. For Christopher Bell and the 20 team, their race strategy contrasted greatly from that of MTJ and the 19. Adam Stevens gradually made the adjustments necessary to get better all race long. Chase Elliott had to really push the issue with Kurt Busch and Joey Logano in the short term, because behind him, Christopher Bell had every resource he needed and the motivation to steal yet another win from the 2020 Cup Series champion.
Christopher Bell to the inside of Chase Elliott right here in lap traffic. Can he get the job done? Off of turn 2, the 20 car is clear and the new leader.
So Joe Gibbs Racing got to take home yet another lobster that day without having to stop at Red Lobster on the way home. But it was not who you thought was going to bring it home.
Checkered flag, Christopher Bell wins at New Hampshire.
Even though, to be fair here, Christopher Bell has won at New Hampshire 4 times, including his domination of the 2019 and 2021 Xfinity races. Christopher Bell winning this race was critical because, as fate would determine, there would be 16 different winners, and Martin Truex Jr., with 12 race wins and 2 second-place points finishes with JGR, missed the playoffs for the first time since 2014. Like in life, like in the NASCAR playoffs, there are a plethora of different ways to achieve the end goal. For 16 drivers, that end goal being the NASCAR championship, and one JGR driver took the most familiar path for himself and his team, leading laps, maximizing on stage points, and the final finish to where Bristol didn't even matter. And I know who you're thinking this was, Kyle Busch, right? Elite playoff appearances have been a part of his pedigree for years. What if I told you this 18 team self-destructed to the point where Kyle Busch, 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, got eliminated in the round of 16? This may or may not be a surprise whether you're watching this currently or you're watching this well into the future. That JGR driver I was speaking of was Christopher Bell. At Darlington, Kansas, and Bristol, he combined to lead 155 laps and earned himself 3 top 5s. The 20 team showed the value of consistency. They learned how to minimize mistakes in the regular season when they were in the dumps, and it definitely helped keep their stress levels low before their anxiety would be turbo boosted for the remainder of the playoffs. At Texas, Christopher Bell was one of many drivers that were plagued by tire issues because Goodyear, they had a nightmarish outcome in 2022, the second of which would be unrepairable even with 10 minutes to repair the car under the DVP. Talladega, meanwhile, would be a mid-pack finish, Not losing points, but most importantly, not gaining the points necessary to be in a position to transfer on points. The Charlotte Roval was now a must-win for Christopher Bell, and for a majority of this race, to be honest, the team looked dead before debris would ultimately cause chaos like it always does. Adam Stevens, being a 1000 IQ crew chief, realized the theme of this race was now complete anarchy. No more racing etiquette, no more letting drivers have a free pass, letting them cut in the line. His realization of this led him to put 4 tires on the D-Wall Camry. Christopher Bell, now with 4 feel-goods as Clint Bowyer would call him, was now on offense to try to save his season.
And here comes Bell.
Bell to the inside of the 8 car. He takes second place.
Out front is Christopher Bell. He's past the 4 of Harvick. Christopher Bell, he has done it. He's won his way into the round of 8.
With this victory, Christopher Bell didn't just punch his ticket to the round of 8. This was Stanley Black & Decker's first win with Joe Gibbs Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series. Yes, you heard that correctly. Even with drivers like Matt Kenseth, Eric Jones, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, and Carl Edwards, despite honestly being so close, in fact tape measure short, of victory at Phoenix in 2016, all of those drivers failed to win a race with the Joe Gibbs Racing team so dominant in this era. In that way, Christopher Bell shook up the JGR norm for Stanley Black & Decker. Drought-ending victory for Christopher Bell was some much-needed momentum for yet another chaotic playoff round. We all know who Bubba Wallace drove like at Las Vegas.
Off of turn 4 here.
And into the wall goes Bubba Wallace. And he comes back across the track, tags the 5.
And perhaps the only thing that saved Kyle Larson from getting a serious injury was Christopher Bell. Bell ended up saving his fellow dirt racer from a concussion, but at what cost? His chances to point his way into the championship. Now all that consistency, the consistency that really cultured this team, it was out the window. Unfortunately at Homestead, he, like everyone, was no match for Kyle Larson. In order to make the championship race, Joe Gibbs Racing needed to win like Denny Hamlin at Phoenix in 2019. While the veteran driver at JGR dominated the first 2 stages, lights out in fact, who was there when it mattered? Christopher Bell. Adam Stevens would roll out the same game plan he had for the Charlotte Roval, giving up track position and instead putting Christopher Bell on offense for one last time. And with a ticket to Phoenix on the line, Christopher Bell would do something JGR's core has done time and time again.
There's the push. He gets to the inside.
Up on the curve.
For the lead. Bell to the inside. Oh, and more contact. Bell out of turn 4. He's going to do it. He's won his way into the championship.
It was Christopher Bell advancing to the championship with a clutch victory. In fact, he would be the only JGR driver to advance to the big race. Denny Hamlin nearly joined him before Ross Chastain pulled his Hail Melon, and even if it didn't happen, he still would have been knocked out after Brad Keselowski, a non-playoff driver, failed post-race inspection. Christopher Bell, with this win, became the first driver in NASCAR history to make the Truck, Xfinity, and Cup Championship 4 in his career, though in the championship race, his pit crew would shake up the JGR norm by having an un-JGR-like slow pit stop. Despite finishing 10th in the race and coming up short of the end goal, Christopher Bell would finish 3rd in the championship standings. For the first time since Matt Kenseth in 2013, the 20 car was the highest finishing JGR car in the points. Christopher Bell also carried the torch in wins, a first for the 20 team since 2015, top 5s, top 10s, and average finish. 2022 was a typical JGR season with multiple victories and laps led by its drivers, though it wasn't Martin Truex Jr. being rock solid, that was Christopher Bell. It wasn't Denny Hamlin coming up clutch to advance to the championship race, that was Christopher Bell. It wasn't Kyle Busch pumped full of energy leading the Joe Gibbs Racing team with his generational talents, that was Christopher Bell. While the results stayed the same, with the exception of Stanley Black & Decker actually winning a race thanks to Christopher Bell, indeed, Christopher Bell in 2022 shook up the Joe Gibbs Racing norm. If you enjoyed this video, may I introduce you to how a former Joe Gibbs Racing sponsor, M&M's, leaving NASCAR really exposes their demographics? Or why don't you watch a video about Mellow Yellow, the sponsor that shook up the NASCAR norm? Other than that, this is Nathan for NRF Productions. Life's a beach, and then you drive.